Hello everybody, this is Ron Ray as always. I was watching a short and it had nothing to do with mental health whatsoever. It had nothing to do with neurodiversity, nothing to do with neurodivergency. And yes, there's a difference between neurodiverse and neurodivergent. Um, but I was watching a short. I forget the name of the creator, but she does 2000s and 2010s style shorts with the makeup and the outfits and the vintage perfumes. And I grew up during that era, and it got me thinking about um, in this video, the character who um, she's got some clip in hair, and the tract of the left is showing, which back in the day is how we wore it because we didn't know any better. And I barely wore them because that was what they looked like back in the day. We didn't have, we were too young to have the money to go to a salon and get it done professionally. And B, I don't think it was quite as popular back then, so not all the professionals would offer that service. And um, in this skit, the character is ungrateful that her friend points out that the left is showing and that the extensions are not brushed and that they look bad. They look unkempt. And she tells her that she has to brush them to take care of them. And the character she's talking to, who has the unkempt hair clip ins, she's ungrateful and tells her to chillax. And it really got me thinking about how different it is for someone who is self aware with schizophrenia versus someone who either doesn't have schizophrenia or isn't self aware. Or both, especially both. When you are self aware and you have schizophrenia, a lot of the time you want to learn how to fit in better so that you can control whether or not you look schizophrenic. So that in certain settings, you look more professional. Maybe you want people to not notice you have schizophrenia. And the thing is, when people notice you have schizophrenia, they don't think of the word schizophrenia most of the time. They think of a various collection of symptoms, and if they think of the word schizophrenia, they are thinking of psychosis, not an entire condition. A condition that causes you to have trouble dressing yourself at times, trouble following fashion trends. I personally, if my shirt is on backwards, or my collar is halfway popped, or it's halfway tucked in a weird spot or whatever, I want people, my friends and family who are close to me, I want them to say, "Hey, you may not know that it's in fashion to wear it this way, but we were wearing it this way," or, "Oh, I don't know if you remembered to check when you're getting dressed to unpop your collar or untuck your sleeve," or whatever it is. Because schizophrenia both can make you unaware of certain social trends, as well as it can make it hard to put tasks into the correct order, and therefore you may forget steps because you put them in at a different step in the process and either forgot about them entirely because you got to the end of the task without doing them, or by the time you got to the end of the task, it was past the point of no return and you could no longer do the step you missed. So solutions to our schizophrenia can be hard for us to come up with on our own. And while this doesn't go for everybody with schizophrenia, I've definitely met, I had a friend, well, I had a partner at the time, who had schizoaffective disorder like me, And schizoaffective disorder is a mood disorder plus schizophrenia. I have bipolar disorder plus schizophrenia. But they were morally opposed to. My kitten just stopped recording, so I don't know where I cut off. This person I knew who had schizoaffective disorder, just like me, they were morally opposed to enforcing um, anything to do with fashion that wasn't about safety and hygiene. So they saw wrinkly clothes as saving time. They saw, like not fixing a nip slip as an act of autonomy. All these different things that are social faux pas, they said that if someone discriminates against you based off of that, you don't need them in your life. And I totally agree. I totally do. However, at this point, it's not just about me, it's also about my loved ones who are represented by me. Because I am the most public facing figure in our family as a content creator, whereas the rest of my family, they're, accomplished, whereas I am not. And I try my best to learn how to fit in and practice that skill, even if I don't value it myself. Because I want to be able to control whether or not I'm doing it instead of just defaulting to being unable to fit in. So for example, it comes in handy in legal situations where you have to go before a judge and jury. You want to look sane. You want to look mentally competent. You want to look respectful to the judge and the sanctity of the law. So you dress a certain way, you do your makeup a certain way, and all that. Job interviews, you want them to think you're competent and sane. And even though that's ableist of them, life isn't fair, and although it's each individual's job to make it as fair as they individually can, that doesn't mean that everybody believes that perspective, and they may not strive to make it fair for you because they're busy making it fair for themselves. And hiring someone who has red flags, such as not being able to iron their clothes or fresh press, permanent press your clothes so that they don't have wrinkles, that is going to be a red flag on job interviews. And they're going to be less likely to hire you if you have wrinkly clothes or if you don't tuck in your button down shirt or if I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh, if your polka dot underwear is showing through your clothing. Me personally, I'll wear polka dot clothing under something see-through, and if people don't feel attracted to me for whatever reason, they just ignore it. And if they are attracted to me, that's a little bonus for them, Um, it's not like, you can see, like, it's not like you can see through and see body parts. It's just the pattern of my underwear is showing, There's a huge difference between something so see-through that you see an entire body part underneath it versus just being able to see patterns through it. Um, but, what else? Before I took up hijab, I used to wear bras, like sports bras, as a shirt and no shirt over it, go out in public. And um where it was legal to do so, I would take off my bra in public to change if I needed to. Um there's there's a lot of social rules that a schizophrenic person, for whatever reason, someone living with schizophrenia may, for whatever reason, not follow to a T or at all. And as long as it's not hurting anybody, I don't think that we should enforce social rules that disadvantage people based off of a genetic lottery. You know? Like, if you are not hurting anybody, you should be able to let your freak flag fly. And as long as, you know, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, they're, like nudity in public, for example. If you go to a beach in France, it's okay. Now, if you were to be sexually inappropriate at one of these places, there would be huge consequences, you know? But nudity inherently doesn't equal anything morally. And I've met plenty of people either below a certain age or with a certain developmental disability that scratch private parts in public or take off their clothes at inappropriate times. God knows I, for the longest time, refused to wear clothing. And it got to the point where I was aging out of being able to do that and still refusing to wear clothing. Um, this little munchkin is threatening to turn off the camera again. But being able to pick and choose when I do and don't fit into society is a skill set that I have yet to master and have been working on for years. Um, and in order to have both options available to me, I have to practice both options. So that means I have to practice following the rules of society, whether I agree with them or not. And therefore, I find it helpful when people who don't have autism, schizophrenia, and everything else that I have, when they point out to me, hey, you're wearing your clothing wrong, or hey, I know you're learning a new makeup skill and you did it kind of wrong here. Let me give you some constructive criticism. That's all I see it as, is constructive criticism. I don't see it as you trying to make me feel bad, unless you obviously are. Like, um, okay, so during my first pregnancy, I had gas. I had the toots. I had to fart all the time, and I held it in because my partner at the time would make fun of me all the time anytime I would fart. Neither of us knowing at the time that farting was a symptom of pregnancy, but that's for another story. Well, there was this one night, and like I said, I held it in all the time, so I would fart all night long while I was unconscious. One night, I woke up and he wasn't in bed next to me. So I get up and I go look for him. And he's on the couch. And I ask him, hey, honey, why aren't you in bed? Instead of just simply saying, you farted it and it smelled really bad, so I came out here for a while, he waxed poetic about how bad my fart smelled in an attempt to humiliate me. there is a way to tell somebody that, they made a social faux pas that does not mock them, that does not seek to revel in their misery at the revelation that they have made said faux pas. And as long as you're coming to me in good faith, not trying to mock me, not trying to undermine my authority in my own life and experience, lived experience, as long as you're not, coming for my throat, I'm open to constructive criticism. And a lot of people aren't. And it's weird to me that they aren't, I guess that's one of the things that my autism makes it hard for me to understand, is why people take constructive criticism to be negative criticism. But it's helpful to have people in your life who are confident and knowledgeable enough to point out to you when you can improve. And if you don't have someone in your life who can respectfully and positively tell you where you can and how to improve, then it can be hard to A, learn to improve, and B, learn to accept criticism. And it can be hard to learn how to give criticism. But when it comes to disabilities, learning to recognize them and accommodate for them is a responsibility that everybody has, including disabled people. I've got a million disabilities, but I don't have dwarfism. I gotta be respectful to people with dwarfism. And I don't have schizoid personality disorder. I gotta be respectful to people with schizoid personality disorder. And I don't have... Let me think of something I don't have. I don't have obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So I gotta be conscious of how to accommodate for people with that condition. Most of my alters don't have histrionic personality disorder. I gotta learn how to love and care for people with histrionic personality disorder. It's always our responsibility to make the world more fair. It doesn't always mean that responsibility looks the same for every individual. So for me, I can do my part in my own ways. I'm not the type to be able to lift an entire bus to save an orphan from getting crushed beneath, but I am the type to adopt or give therapy to that orphan after they've been saved from being crushed from a bus. For example, a fictional example. I'm not the kind of person to I'm not the kind of person to help people get to the point of recognizing their own cognitive dissonance. However, I am the kind of person that once you've recognized your cognitive dissonance enough to overcome it, You can come to me for whatever education you want as long as you do it respectfully. But I'm not the type of person to teach people how to be respectful to me. You know, we each have our own ways of making the world more fair. And this quote comes from politics, but I feel like it really applies to non-politics and without any other like you can completely separate it from the source material. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. That means what you are able to provide, you should provide it to whoever needs what you can provide. And we should not expect from you to provide what you cannot. However, people will still need things you cannot provide, and therefore we will get those things from the people who can provide it. And that is what is fair. And I really think that you don't have to be a communist or a Marxist or a Leninist or any of the combination of the two or one or the other. You know, you don't have to be any of those things in order to believe that fairness is from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. But yeah. I won't say that just assume that someone who's open about having schizophrenia wants your criticism, but I will say that in my case, as a schizophrenic who wants criticism, please, 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 please point out how I can do better if you know how to point it out. And that's how you can be a good ally to people with disabilities. It's just use whatever abilities you have to help them reach solutions that they cannot reach on their own. All right, I'll see you all in the next one. Love you. Bye.